I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. We heard these words, brothers and sisters, from the letter to the Galatians earlier today. And today pretty much brings to an end the festival of the exaltation of the cross, which we celebrated on the 14th of September, being the Sunday after the exaltation of the cross. And so the whole theme for the entire week has been about sacrifice, giving, changing the priorities of our lives such that we can be guided by what the cross symbolizes: love, unconditional love, and sacrifice. So the logic here is, if we did do that, if we did change our lives and follow what the cross means, that would be a big change. And so what we have from this passage is pointing out that we allow Christ to live within us. You see, we crucify our old life. We end it. We put it aside. We are no longer guided by the principles, the normal principles or tenets of what society teaches, but we fully have the tenets of our Christian faith as our guiding light. If we were to do that, we would acquire new life, new meaning, new purpose. So much so that Apostle Paul, who wrote this letter, goes to the extent to describe this as, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Imagine the extent, the degree to which this union happens of a Christian, of a believer with God through Christ. Full union, full communion, such that Christ lives in us and we live, and our life becomes a testament to Jesus Christ. I'll give you a very good example in just a moment. Of course, God is spirit, God is divine, but we are flesh and we are mortal. Nevertheless, we live a life in the flesh, yes, but we live it by faith in the Son of God, who loved us and gave himself for us. That is the message of the cross. Gave himself for us, sacrificed himself for us. Let's look at an example. One of the saints which we remember today, the 19th of September, is the holy martyr Zosimas, the hermit. Let's see to what extent his adoption of the life of Christ and of the path of the cross, to what extent that changed his life. We often think, my dear friends, that if we followed the tenets of Christianity, we'd live a good life. If we followed the principles of the gospel, we'll have a good life, a prosperous life, money will fall off the trees for us. That is the gospel of prosperity. You've perhaps heard of that. The Orthodox Christians do not subscribe to the gospel of prosperity. We see that as a divergent perspective, one that is certainly based on the Old Testament, certainly, and those who preach the gospel of prosperity, that is, have a good relationship with God, and that will manifest itself with prosperity and success and money and property and all the rest of it, material success. That is certainly a concept in the Old Testament. But we Orthodox Christians, among so many other things of the Old Testament, we do set them aside as being an immature way of looking at our relationship with God. So let's look at the holy martyr Zosimas, who didn't have comfort, whose Christianity did not give him prosperity, whose Christianity and Christian faith did not give material gain, the opposite. He ended up homeless. We're talking about the early period of Christian history, the first 300 years. And in Sicily, the island of Sicily, there was a governor called Domitianus, and he went hunting in the mountains with his servants. He came across an old man in the forests who was surrounded by wild animals as tame as lambs. Domitianus asked the man who he was, and the old man replied that his name was Zosimas, that he was a Christian, and that he had lived among wild beasts in the forest who were actually better behaved than the people in the city who were torturing Christians. This offended Domitianus, who was a pagan, who himself was a cruel persecutor of Christians. And he thought, well, let's make an example of this old man who thinks that the animals are better than us, who live in the cities, us civilized people. And he chained Zosimas and sent him ahead to the city where he wanted to torture him in public to make an example of him to those who were in the city and were hiding the Christian faith, that indeed the authorities were out to get them and will get them sooner or later. It was a form of intimidation. Domitianus eventually wounded and bloodied Zosimas with blows. He got his soldiers to tie a stone around his neck and suspend him from a tree. And the governor mocked Zosimas, the hermit, saying, "Call for a wild beast to come forth so that we may all believe." And indeed, the holy martyr prayed to God, and an enormous lion appeared out of the forest, drew near to Zosimas, placed his head under the stone to alleviate the martyr's suffering. And this shocked everyone. In great fear, the governor, Domitianus, freed Zosimas. And Zosimas, from all the torture he had just received, eventually rendered his spirit into the hands of his Lord. The way of the cross indeed, my dear friends. If we are to follow the path of Christ and sacrifice our life like Zosimas did, set aside whatever is considered important in this life. And he did it to the extreme. He did it to the ultimate degree. And of course, we need not do the ultimate degree, but certainly learn from this as an ideal and certainly set aside prosperity and material gain as the be-all and end-all in our life, and set things and priorities in a different order and sequence. This would be the fruit. This would be the glory. This would be the victory that would come of it. That ultimately, sooner or later, our material being, our material goods, our material possessions do mean nothing. Let each and every one of us apply this to the degree that we can, and the cross that we wear around our neck set the tone in our life. Set the tone of sacrifice, of love, and of giving. No longer should we live, but Christ should live in us. Amen. Thank you for joining us today and this morning, dear friends. Please press all the buttons available to you on YouTube, the like button, share button, subscribe button. In the notifications section, which is the bell symbol, tap into that and press all notifications. That will allow you to get a push notification from YouTube and an email for when our services pop up. Thank you for joining us this morning, and we'll see you next week.